My brother sold me to the Mafia boss's payment until he decided to make me his wife. A tired accountant walks into a back room to save her reckless brother and signs her life to a ruthless king of the city. He offers a rule: no touch without consent. He offers a cage, guards, codes, and a piano in the dark. Step outside and a rival will claim her. Stay inside and bullets still find the gate. A single shell points to a traitor inside his house. A hidden drive exposes dirty money and bigger sharks. So they do the one thing no one expects: a courthouse wedding under fire. But forged bank records say the boss planned it all. Did he trap her? Or is someone framing them both? When the docks go dark and chains hit concrete, who will she trust? The man who would burn the city to keep her safe? Or the ally holding the match? Will this marriage save their lives or finish them? The fluorescent lights flickered overhead in Valenti's back room, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum. Sarah's fingers trembled as she dropped her heavy tote, the calculator and statements shifting inside with a dull thud. The air felt thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Marco sat hunched at the metal folding table, his usual swagger replaced by visible fear. His leg bounced rapidly, a nervous tic she recognized from childhood. The contrast between her brother and the man across from him couldn't have been starker. Dante Ruggiero commanded the cramped space like a king on a throne, even while seated in a cheap plastic chair. His charcoal suit was impeccable, his posture rigid. Those dark eyes tracked every movement with predatory focus. "Your brother's choices have consequences, Miss Valenti," Dante said, his accent subtle but present. Each word carried weight, measured and precise. "The Russians don't appreciate being cheated. They're less understanding than I am." Sarah's gaze fell to the ledger pages between them, her forged signature jumping out like an accusation. Her stomach churned. $1.2 million, Marco? What were you thinking? "I was winning at first," Marco pleaded, voice cracking. "I could have doubled it, tripled it even. Just needed more time." "Enough." Dante's quiet command silenced the room. Even his men, one lean and watchful, the other broader and battle-scarred, seemed to stand straighter. Sarah squared her shoulders, mind racing through scenarios. 30 days. I work during business hours, maintain my phone, and the deli stays untouched. In exchange, She swallowed hard. "I'll come with you tonight." "Sarah, no," Marco started. "You lost that right when you forged my signature," she cut him off. Years of cleaning up his messes hardening her voice. Dante studied her, his expression unreadable. "Your terms are acceptable, with one addition. You'll stay at my residence for the duration." Rain drummed against the windows, filling the heavy silence. Sarah noticed details with crystal clarity. The faint scent of garlic from the kitchen, the way fluorescent light caught Dante's signet ring, Marco's ragged breathing. "Agreed," she said firmly, though her heart hammered. "But my brother walks out of here alive and stays that way." A ghost of something, approval, amusement, flickered across Dante's features. "I'm a businessman, Miss Valenti. Dead debtors can't pay their dues." He rose with fluid grace, buttoning his jacket. His men moved in sync, one opening the door while the other scanned the street through rain-streaked windows. The walk to the waiting SUV felt endless, water soaked through Sarah's suit jacket, plastering her dark hair to her neck. When they reached the vehicle, Dante extended his hand, a gesture that could have been courtesy or possession. Sarah met his eyes directly, letting the moment stretch before deliberately placing her hand in his. His grip was warm, steady. A clear message passed between them. She chose this, on her terms. The leather seat was cool against her back as she slid in, careful to maintain composure. Through the tinted window, she watched her reflection fragment in raindrops as they pulled away from the only home she'd known. The interior smelled of leather and something distinctly masculine. Dante sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his body. His men took the front seats, the one called Luca, driving with precise care through the wet streets. Sarah watched familiar landmarks blur past. Mrs. Romano's flower shop, the corner where she'd scraped her knee learning to ride a bike, the church where her parents were married. Each one receding into the rainy darkness like pieces of a life she was leaving behind. The silence in the SUV felt charged, heavy with unspoken implications. She could feel Dante watching her, measuring her reactions. Sarah kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Streetlights painted intermittent patterns across their faces as they headed toward the wealthier part of the city. Sarah had seen Dante's palazzo from a distance. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the imposing structure that rose above restored brownstones like a fortress. Her practical flats were soaked, her suit wrinkled beyond saving, but Sarah forced herself to focus on numbers instead of panic. 30 days, 720 hours, 43,200 minutes, each one carefully negotiated, a price agreed upon to save her family. The SUV's wipers kept steady rhythm against the strengthening rain. In the driver's seat, Luca navigated the slick streets with careful precision, while Rafe maintained vigilant watch from the passenger side. Their presence was both protective and confining, a reminder that while she had chosen this arrangement, she was still very much in their world now. The digital display on the dashboard read 8:20 p.m. when they turned onto a tree-lined avenue. Sarah watched her old life disappear in the side mirror, the deli's neon sign growing smaller until it was swallowed by the rain and darkness. The SUV's headlights swept across limestone walls as they passed through wrought iron gates at 9:05 p.m. Sarah watched security cameras track their movement, their red lights blinking in the rain like mechanical fireflies. The courtyard opened before them, a study in old-world grandeur adapted for modern warfare. "Welcome to my home," Dante said as the vehicle stopped under a covered portico. His words carried weight. This wasn't just a residence, but a power center. Luca opened her door, and Sarah stepped out, taking in the mansion's imposing facade. Glass-paned windows rose 3 stories high, crowned by an atrium that caught what remained of the evening light. Carved cornices and classical columns spoke of heritage money, while discreet security features whispered of necessary paranoia. Inside, her heels clicked against marble floors. The foyer alone could have swallowed her entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over antique furnishings and artwork that probably cost more than the deli's annual revenue. "This way." Dante led her up a sweeping staircase, its mahogany banister smooth beneath her palm. Luca followed several paces behind, his footsteps nearly silent despite his size. They reached the east wing, where Luca approached a door with both a key card reader and a numbered pad. Sarah watched his fingers move. 4101-419. The numbers settled in her mind like puzzle pieces waiting to be connected. The suite beyond the door took her breath away. Not with opulence, though that was present, but with unexpected warmth. Cream-colored walls, plush rugs in deep blues and grays, and furniture that invited rather than intimidated. A sitting room flowed into a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, with a marble bathroom visible through French doors. "Dr. Leone will examine you shortly," Dante said, standing near the doorway. "Standard procedure." As if summoned, a woman in her 50s appeared, carrying a medical bag. "I'm Dr. Gianna Leone," she introduced herself, her manner professional but kind. "This won't take long." The examination was brief and respectful: blood pressure, pulse, basic health questions. Sarah answered mechanically, her mind cataloging exits and angles, counting steps and memorizing layouts. "You'll have freedom within the East Wing," Dante explained once the doctor left. His voice remained level, neither threatening nor patronizing. "Your phone will be configured with our secure app. Bianca, the house manager, will handle any requests you have." He paused, dark eyes holding hers. "One more thing. I will not touch you without explicit consent. Any intimacy that develops would be entirely your choice." The statement hung between them, backed by steel rather than seduction. A soft whine interrupted the moment. From beneath an ornate bench, a small brindle dog emerged, his tail tucked but nose working overtime. He approached Sarah cautiously, pressing a cold nose against her palm. "He came with the property," Dante said dismissively. Though the dog's collar was clearly new, the name Fico engraved in fresh lettering, the lie was oddly humanizing. "Of course he did," Sarah murmured, scratching behind Fico's ears. The dog leaned into her touch, anxiety melting into tentative trust. "Get some rest," Dante said. "Bianca will bring breakfast at 8. With that, he left, the door's electronic lock engaging with a soft beep. Alone at last, Sarah moved methodically through the suite. The shower's hot water helped clear her mind, but didn't stop her analysis. After drying off and changing into provided silk pajamas, she began her inspection. The windows were flawless and shatterproof, she confirmed by tapping. Vents in the ceiling were modern but too narrow for escape. She drew a detailed map on hotel stationery, marking distances and noting security features. Violence wouldn't free her, but information might. "Know your ground," she muttered, channeling her father's voice. "Know your leverage." Her phone buzzed at 11:30 p.m. Marco, texting from an unknown number. "You okay?" she typed back quickly. "Yes, stay put. Don't be stupid." The message sent with a quiet whoosh, carrying equal parts warning and love. By midnight, she lay in the massive bed, its Egyptian cotton sheets soft against her skin. Fico had claimed a spot near her feet, his warmth oddly comforting. Through the wall came the sound of piano music, not recorded, but played live. A single melody, haunting and melancholic, repeated with subtle variations. Sarah closed her eyes, picturing Dante at the keys, those hands that commanded violence, creating something beautiful in the dark. The music spoke of loss, of memories kept private, of a humanity he probably thought weakness. The notes drifted through the wall like ghosts, telling stories of the man behind the monster. Sarah lay awake at 12:15 a.m., adding this piece to her mental puzzle. Dante Ruggiero, who killed without hesitation, but rescued small dogs and played piano in the night, thinking no one could hear. Fico sighed in his sleep, twitching slightly. The piano continued its solitary song. Sarah stared at the ceiling, mind working through scenarios, while the melody painted pictures of a complexity she hadn't expected. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from eaves, marking time like a metronome as the night stretched toward dawn. The darkness held secrets, in the walls, in the music, in the man who ruled this fortress. Sarah would learn them all, not for escape, but for survival, for leverage, for understanding the power structure she'd stepped into. The piano notes wove through her thoughts, a soundtrack to strategies forming in the quiet hours. Sunlight poured through the atrium's glass ceiling at 7 a.m., casting prismatic patterns across the marble floor. Bianca knocked, precisely 3 times before entering with the silver coffee service and a garment bag. "Good morning, Miss Valenti," she said, her efficiency wrapped in genuine warmth. "Italian roast, cream on the side, and your attire for today." Sarah unzipped the bag to reveal an ivory dress. Simple but expensive, its fabric whispering of boardrooms and old money. "House protocol suggests appropriate attire," Bianca explained, her tone carefully neutral. "Of course it does," Sarah murmured. She accepted the dress but paired it with her own navy cardigan and practical flats. Small rebellions, but necessary ones. While sipping the excellent coffee, Sarah mapped the palazzo's pulse. Guards moved like clockwork, shift changes every 2 hours, marked by quiet footsteps and radio clicks. At 9:45 a.m., delivery trucks rumbled through the service entrance, kitchen doors propped wide for produce crates and fresh bread. Behind the industrial laundry, a service tunnel stretched toward the underground garage, its existence betrayed by the whisper of ventilation fans. At 8:30 a.m., Luca appeared with an invitation, more command than request, to breakfast. The conservatory sparkled like a jewel box, sunlight dancing through glass walls onto a table set with fresh fruit and pastries. Dante sat reading financial reports, his dark suit impeccable. "Where's Marco?" Sarah asked without preamble, remaining standing. Dante set down his paper, dark eyes assessing her. "Alive and safe, as promised." He reached for a tablet, turned it to show a security feed. Marco sprawled across his bed above the deli, snoring slightly. A man Sarah recognized as Carlo, respected as neutral territory in neighborhood politics, stood guard outside. "I protect what's mine," Dante continued. "Not from kindness, but because chaos serves no one's interests. Sit, eat." "I'm not yours," Sarah countered, but took a seat. The croissants were still warm. "No," he agreed, surprising her. "You're collateral. There's a difference." They sparred over coffee and fresh figs, Sarah probing for information about the Bratva's reach, Dante deflecting with questions about her forensic work. His intelligence was sharp, his knowledge of financial systems impressive. In another life, he might have been a legitimate CEO instead of a criminal emperor. At 10:05 a.m., Sarah slipped the paperclip she'd palmed from breakfast into her pocket. The service tunnel's lock was basic, designed for function rather than security. 3 careful twists, and it yielded. The tunnel stretched ahead, emergency lights casting pools of yellow every 20 feet. Concrete walls amplified her footsteps despite her careful tread. She'd memorized bus routes. The stop 3 blocks south would get her to the deli in 20 minutes. At 10:20 a.m., voices echoed from above, Russian, low, and professional. Through a ventilation grate, she glimpsed 2 men in workers' coveralls, moving with too much precision to be actual electricians. A white van bore magnetic signs for city power and light. The phone number's area code wasn't local. A red laser dot swept the pavement, marking ranges and angles. Sarah pressed against the wall, pulse thundering. The Bratva wasn't waiting for Marco's debt to expire. They were mapping Dante's defenses, preparing to take what they wanted. If she left now, she'd be walking into their hands. Debt transfer, giving them legal claim within the underground's twisted rules. She retreated, careful to leave no trace. Back in the main house, she nearly collided with Dante and Luca, studying satellite imagery on a tablet. Orlov's men circled the property like wolves testing fences. Dante looked at her, noting her slightly mussed hair and the paperclip still clutched in one hand. But he didn't rage or threaten. He simply said, "Now you understand the rules of this city." By 11 a.m., Sarah stood at the atrium's edge, watching guards materialize from hidden posts. Their movements were precise, professional, tripling the security with subtle efficiency. No shouted orders, no dramatic gestures. Just the quiet click of weapons being checked and radio channels synchronized. The morning sun caught the bulletproof glass above, scattering light like diamonds across the floor. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, cardigan soft against her skin. The ivory dress felt like armor now, not chains. Outside these walls, worse predators waited. Sometimes safety came in unexpected cages, protected by dangerous men who played piano in the dark and rescued small dogs while building empires on blood and shadow. Armed men moved through the courtyard below, their paths creating invisible geometric patterns of protection. Sarah watched them dance their lethal choreography, understanding blooming like frost across glass. She wasn't just collateral anymore. She was a piece on a larger board, where the game was survival and the players dealt in debts paid in flesh and fear. The reality of her situation crystallized in that moment of sunlight and shadow. The palazzo wasn't just a prison, it was a fortress. And sometimes the safest place to be was behind the monster's walls when worse monsters circled outside. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palazzo's courtyard when the first shots shattered the quiet. At 2:25 p.m., the motorcycles appeared, 3 black bikes weaving through traffic, riders hunched low. The staccato burst of gunfire sent guards diving for cover as bullets peppered the front gate. Sarah barely registered being moved. One moment she stood near the entrance. The next, Luca's iron grip yanked her behind a massive marble column. The sound of return fire was deafening in the enclosed space. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Rafe's fluid movements, dropping to one knee, weapon steady, taking calculated shots rather than spraying bullets. Dante's response was coldly efficient. He moved like a predator, each step purposeful as he closed in on a wounded shooter who'd crashed through the gate. The man writhed on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Dante's questions came in rapid-fire Neapolitan, each word sharp as a blade. The shooter's answers emerged between pained gasps. From her protected position, Sarah's analytical mind kicked in despite the adrenaline. A brass casing had skittered near her feet. She noted the distinct marking, S-74, before Luca pulled her further back. That wasn't typical street ammunition. By 2:40 p.m., an unnatural quiet descended. One guard clutched a bleeding arm but was already being tended to by Dr. Leone. No civilians had been caught in the crossfire. The shooters who'd escaped left their wounded companion behind, a calculated sacrifice. Dante's face was granite as he led Sarah through the secured courtyard. Mikhail Orlov sent them, he explained, voice controlled but edged with steel. The shooter confirmed it. Their orders were specific. The girl is the debt. Sarah processed this, mind already spinning through implications. "I need my laptop," she said, "under whatever supervision you require." Something flickered in Dante's expression. Approval, perhaps, at her focus rather than hysteria. He nodded to Luca, who retrieved her computer within minutes. The afternoon stretched into evening as Sarah dove into research. Her consulting work had given her access to detailed records of police auctions and supply chains. The S-74 stamp nagged at her memory. Cross-referencing her databases revealed why it belonged to a boutique munitions supplier, one that specialized in industrial-grade ammunition for construction companies. Their channels were clean, regulated, legitimate. Orlov's operations typically ran through much darker corners. As twilight painted the sky in watercolor purples, Sarah found herself in the conservatory with Dante. The glass walls reflected their images like mirrors now, the garden beyond, lost to growing darkness. The earlier violence felt distant here, though armed men still patrolled the perimeter with heightened vigilance. "The piano music last night," Sarah said, breaking a lengthy silence. "Bach's Goldberg variations?" Dante's shoulders tensed slightly. "You know it? My mother taught piano before she died. Why did you stop playing?" He studied his reflection rather than meet her gaze. "After my mother's death, music felt unnecessary. Now I only play when the noise in my head becomes too loud." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. At 8:10 p.m., a courier arrived with evidence bags from the scene. Sarah carefully marked down the casing's details in her growing notes. The supplier code taunted her. a legitimate company's ammunition in the hands of Russian mobsters. It didn't track. By 8:45 p.m., she sat at the desk in her suite, the single lamp casting a warm circle of light. The brass casing gleamed dully as she turned it over and over. Numbers and connections flickered through her mind like fireflies, just out of reach. Someone had to be diverting shipments, someone with enough authority to avoid triggering automated alerts, someone buried deep enough in the supply chain to touch legitimate merchandise without leaving traces. Fico patted over and rested his head on her knee, offering canine comfort. Sarah absently scratched behind his ears while staring at her growing web of data. Years of forensic accounting had taught her that money always left footprints, and weapons left even clearer trails. This pattern was wrong, like a puzzle piece that looked right but wouldn't quite fit. The palazzo had gone quiet, save for the steady footsteps of guards making their rounds. Somewhere in the building, Dante was likely reviewing security footage, planning countermoves. The attack had been a message. Orloff wouldn't wait for Marco's debt to expire. He wanted something else, something worth risking open warfare in broad daylight. Sarah spread her notes across the desk, connecting points with sharp pencil lines. Construction companies, shipping manifests, supplier codes, legitimate businesses shouldn't intersect with mob territory. Yet here was proof in brass and lead, a dead shooter's pocket holding ammunition that had passed through all the proper channels before finding its way to the wrong hands. The desk lamp cast stark shadows across her papers, making the connections stand out in sharp relief. Someone was playing a longer game, using Orloff's aggression as cover for something bigger. The brass casing wasn't just evidence of an attack, it was a thread that, when pulled, might unravel a deeper conspiracy. Her fingers itched to dig deeper, to follow the numbers to their source. This was her element, not violence and power plays, but the patient unraveling of financial knots. Someone had gotten sloppy, leaving this breadcrumb of legitimate ammunition in an illegitimate operation. Now it was just a matter of backtracing the supply chain until she found where the diversion began. Morning sunlight streamed through the palazzo's windows as Dante approached Sarah at precisely 9 a.m. His expression was carefully neutral, but his request was unexpected. "I need your expertise during an interrogation," he said, watching her reaction. An arms broker named Matteo Sarti was caught near the docks with some interesting paperwork. Sarah straightened in her chair. "I have one condition," she stated firmly. "No torture, not while I'm present." A ghost of approval crossed Dante's face. Agreed. Sometimes information is the sharpest weapon. The drive to the warehouse was silent, tension building with each mile. They arrived at 10 a.m., the industrial district's emptiness making their footsteps echo. Inside a sparse office, Matteo Sarti sat handcuffed to a metal chair, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's chill. Sarah settled at a makeshift desk, methodically reviewing receipt books while Dante circled their prisoner. Her trained eye caught the discrepancies immediately, lot numbers that didn't follow sequence, serial numbers appearing twice, and a recurring company name that set off warning bells. Meridiana Logistics. "These transfers," she murmured, tracing the pattern. "They're split into tiny amounts, flowing through different accounts. Classic money laundering setup." Dante didn't touch Teo, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Instead, he pulled up a chair and began speaking in conversational tones about Teo's daughter, her private school schedule, her ballet classes on Thursdays, her favorite spot in the park where she practiced violin. The color drained from Teo's face. "Tell us what we need to know," Dante continued smoothly, "and I'll ensure you both disappear safely. New names, new life, my protection." Teo's hands trembled. "There were 2 pallets," he whispered. "S74 casings. I passed them to a man who always wears cufflinks. Red enamel ones." Sarah's head snapped up. She'd seen those cufflinks daily at the palazzo, gleaming on the perfectly pressed shirts of Vincenzo Costa, Dante's trusted consigliere. The revelation hung heavy in the air as they returned to the palazzo. By 1:15 p.m., Sarah was ensconced in her suite, a fresh notebook from Bianca open before her. She began mapping connections, companies, accounts, dates, and names forming an intricate web of deception. Late afternoon light slanted through the windows as Dante brought coffee. Sarah noticed his hands shaking slightly as he poured. "Your hands," she said softly. "It's nothing." He set the cup down carefully. After a pause, he added, "Thank you. For this morning, the boundary you set. It reminds me I'm still a man who can choose." "You are," she confirmed. "A man who keeps his word." As darkness fell, Bianca delivered dinner on a silver tray. Fico padded over from his favorite spot beneath the antique desk, hopeful for scraps. Sarah took a moment to text Marco their family's old safety code. Pesto jars, don't move. The night deepened. At 11:30 p.m., Sarah stared at her notebook, circling 2 entries repeatedly. Meridiana Logistics and Costa. Tomorrow she would dive into Dante's complete portfolio. The numbers wouldn't lie, they never did. She spread additional papers across the desk, cross-referencing dates and transactions. Each entry added another piece to the puzzle. Shipping manifests showed consistent discrepancies in inventory counts. Insurance documents listed coverage for cargo that never officially existed. Bank statements revealed a sophisticated shell game of transfers and withdrawals. Fico whined softly, sensing her tension. She scratched behind his ears, finding comfort in his steady presence. The dog had become a constant companion during her investigation, somehow knowing when she needed a break from the endless columns of numbers. Through the window, she could see guards patrolling the grounds, their movements precise and coordinated. The palazzo's security had tightened further since the shooting, with additional cameras installed and patrols doubled. Yet the real threat, she was beginning to realize, might already be inside these walls. Bianca appeared silently to collect the dinner tray, pausing to leave a fresh pot of tea. The house manager's efficiency was remarkable, but Sarah had noticed how she watched everything with careful attention. She wondered how much Bianca had observed over her years of service. Sarah rolled her shoulders, stiff from hours of hunching over documents. The coffee Dante had brought sat cold and forgotten, a reminder of their earlier moment of connection. His admission about choosing to be more than violence had struck her. There was a complexity to him that defied simple categorization. The palazzo settled into its nighttime rhythm. Somewhere below, she could hear the faint murmur of voices as guards changed shifts. The occasional crackle of radio communication drifted up, reminding her that while she worked with papers and numbers, others maintained a different kind of vigilance. She reviewed her notes one final time before bed, each page filled with her neat handwriting, documenting the intricate dance of money through various accounts. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, but for now, she had a direction. The truth was there in the numbers, waiting to be uncovered. She just had to follow the trail, no matter where or to whom it led. The city awakened to chaos at 7:30 a.m. Power fluctuations made traffic lights stutter, and the morning news reported scattered violence in 3 neighborhoods. Sarah stood at the palazzo's window, watching Dante's men load essential equipment into armored SUVs with practiced efficiency. "We're moving," Dante announced from the doorway. "The Bratva is testing boundaries. This location is too exposed." Sarah nodded, already packing her laptop and files into her tote. "Where?" "Safe house. Hour north. Packlight." Luca appeared with a travel crate for Fico, who whined but allowed himself to be coaxed inside with treats. Within 20 minutes, they were on the road, part of a 3-vehicle convoy threading through back streets to avoid main thoroughfares. Sarah sat beside Dante in the middle SUV, Luca at the wheel, watching the city fall away through bulletproof glass. The morning sun caught on lake water as they approached the safe house at 9 a.m. The structure rose from the shoreline like a modernist dream, clean lines of glass and concrete softened by surrounding pine trees. Inside, minimalist furnishings emphasized security over comfort. Reinforced windows, strategic sightlines, and a single bedroom with a king-size bed. "Take the bedroom," Dante offered, setting down his laptop case. "I'll use the couch." Sarah assessed the space. The couch was wide but shorter than Dante's frame. "The bed's large enough to share. We can set boundaries." She grabbed a pillow and drew an invisible line down the center of the mattress. "Your side. My side. Clear consent about space." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect. Maybe even admiration. Agreed. They settled into estranged domesticity layered with danger. Sarah spread financial records across the dining table, diving deep into 3 subsidiary companies' books. Numbers didn't lie, and these told stories of systematic theft through microscopically altered shipping manifests. Throughout the day, Dante's phone pulled him outside for hushed conversations in rapid Italian. Each time he returned, his fingers would drum silent piano keys on his thigh. A tell she was learning meant he'd ordered violence from afar. Yet in the safe house, he moved with careful courtesy around her space, keeping his word about boundaries. At 6:45 p.m., lightning split the sky, and nearby transformers exploded in cascading failures. The safe house plunged into darkness, backup generators humming to life for essential systems only. Luca appeared with battery-powered lanterns, their warm glow creating intimate pools of light. Sarah sat cross-legged on the couch, notebook balanced on her knee. "When did you start playing piano?" Age 6, Dante settled nearby, respect for her space evident in the careful distance he maintained. My mother insisted, said music would give me discipline. Did it? It gave me peace, something ordered in a disordered world. He studied her in the lantern light. You? What shaped you? Being the fixer, since I was 12. Sarah traced the edge of her notebook. Marco got in trouble. I got him out. Dad's business struggled. I learned bookkeeping. Mom got sick. I managed insurance claims. It became who I was. You never wanted out? Sometimes, but family is family. Thunder rolled closer. The lantern light caught the angles of Dante's face, softening them. They had drifted closer, drawn by conversation and shared understanding. When Sarah looked up, his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The air between them charged with possibility. Dante leaned forward slightly, then stopped, waiting. Sarah felt the pull, the desire to close the distance, but held back. Not tonight, she whispered. When I kiss you, I want it to be choice, not circumstance. When, he noted, voice rough. Not if. When, she confirmed. He nodded and shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders, as another thunderclap made her shiver. The gesture was protective without being possessive, adding another layer to this complex man who commanded an empire but respected a pillow boundary. Later, they lay fully clothed on opposite sides of the bed, backs touching lightly across the invisible line. Sarah listened to the storm and Dante's steady breathing, thinking about power. Not the kind that failed across the city, but the kind that chose restraint when force was possible. Fico snored softly from his bed in the corner, occasionally twitching in dreams. Outside, guards patrolled in rotating shifts, their footsteps barely audible over the rain. Luca had taken first watch in the security room, monitoring thermal cameras and motion sensors that formed concentric rings of protection around the property. The lantern on the bedside table cast soft shadows on the wall. Sarah watched them dance, aware of every point of contact where Dante's back pressed against hers. His breathing had slowed but hadn't deepened into sleep. He was awake, maintaining this delicate balance between them. At 11:50 p.m., thunder growled in the distance, a reminder of the storm that had driven them closer while respecting the spaces between. Sarah pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of expensive wool and gunpowder, and something uniquely him, the man who could demand anything, had instead offered everything, waiting for her to choose. Rain drummed against bulletproof glass. The backup generators hummed their steady rhythm. In this strange sanctuary of negotiated boundaries and growing trust, Sarah felt the shift in her understanding of power. True strength lay not in what could be taken, but in what was freely given. Dawn crept through the safe house windows at 6:30 a.m., finding Sarah already hunched over the dining table. Spreadsheets carpeted the surface, her laptop's screen casting a bluish glow that reflected off her tired eyes. The restored power hummed steadily throughout the room as she traced her finger along columns of numbers, searching for the thread that would unravel this web of deception. S-74 shipment records sprawled to her left, Meridiana Logistics payment logs to her right. Her accounting brain clicked into high gear, the familiar rhythm of analysis calming her despite the danger. She spotted the subtle anomalies, micro-rounding errors, cents shaved with surgical precision from each transaction. Not random mistakes. Deliberate. A pattern emerged, tied to specific delivery dates that made her pulse quicken. Show me, she muttered, scribbling timestamps in her notebook, the scratch of pen against paper, the only sound in the quiet morning. The shooter's brass casing marked S-74 aligned perfectly with Teo's doctored receipts. Her eyes narrowed as she followed the money trail, revealing 4 cash drops across the city, each one carefully disguised within legitimate transactions. But one location made her breath catch in her throat. Valenti's Deli, on a night Marco had inexplicably closed early, despite it being their busiest evening. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the secure messaging app, the icon glowing against the dark background of her phone. Marco answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness that always signaled trouble. Hey sis, you okay? Static crackled between them. The espresso machine, she said carefully, keeping her voice even despite her racing heart. Remember when it broke last month? Tell me exactly what happened that night. Silence stretched between them, heavy and damning. Then Marco's voice cracked. Sarah, I messed up. Bad. Tell me everything, she demanded, gripping the phone tighter. This guy came in after hours, real smooth type. Designer shoes, fancy watch. Said he needed to wash some cash through the register. Marco's words tumbled out in a rush of guilt. He had this little drive thing. Dropped it when he was counting bills. I grabbed it when he wasn't looking. Where is it now? Sarah asked, already dreading the answer. Got scared when I heard what happened to you. Hid it in that magnetic spice tin. The cinnamon one behind the counter. Nobody ever uses that stuff anyway. Sarah's mind raced, pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. Orlov hadn't targeted her randomly. He'd weaponized Marco's impulsive theft to spark a war with Dante, using Sarah as the perfect pressure point between them. Her brother's mistake had nearly gotten her killed, but it might also hold the key to ending this nightmare. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, documenting everything with meticulous precision. Timestamps, text logs, chain of custody notes. The narrative emerged in clean, irrefutable data points that even Dante's most hardened captains couldn't ignore or dispute. The evidence painted a damning picture of internal betrayal and external manipulation. By 1:00 p.m., they'd returned to the palazzo's familiar limestone walls. The security detail moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the surroundings before ushering her inside. Sarah's heart drummed against her ribs as Dante assembled his inner circle in the study. The heavy wooden doors closed with a soft click that somehow sounded final. She kept her expression neutral when Costa entered, his red enamel cufflinks catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. We need to retrieve something from the deli, she announced, standing beside Dante's desk with her evidence folder clutched in white-knuckled hands. Quietly, tonight, if Orlov's watching, we can't tip our hand or show our cards. Dante studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable as he weighed her words. Then he nodded once, decision made. Luca and Rafe, 10 p.m. His dark eyes held hers, a silent promise passing between them. Marco stays breathing. You have my word. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Sarah paced the balcony, wind whipping her hair around her face as darkness fell over the city. The lights below twinkled innocently, hiding the dangers she now knew lurked in plain sight. At 10:15 p.m., her phone buzzed in her hand. One photo from Luca, a familiar spice tin cracked open, revealing a slim gray drive nestled inside like buried treasure. A second message followed moments later. Got it. Coming home. Clean exit. Sarah gripped the balcony rail, letting the night air cool her flushed cheeks as relief flooded through her. The numbers had given her what guns couldn't. Truth sharp enough to cut through lies, precise enough to expose betrayal. Her specialized skills had proven more valuable than any weapon in this war of shadows. Inside the palazzo, guards moved with heightened vigilance, their hands never straying far from their weapons. Fico padded over to press against her legs, his warm weight offering silent comfort. Through the study's open door, she heard Dante speaking rapid Italian on the phone, his voice carrying that controlled edge that meant plans were in motion. Deadly, irrevocable plans. Luca had positioned additional men around the perimeter, invisible in the shadows but ready to strike at a moment's notice. Rafe coordinated with the tech team in the basement command center, ensuring their surveillance caught any counter moves from Orlov's people. The air thrummed with potential energy, like the moment before lightning strikes, charged and dangerous. In her suite, spreadsheets and notebooks created a paper trail that would stand up to any scrutiny. Her laptop held encrypted backups, each transaction and discrepancy cataloged with forensic precision. The evidence was undeniable, a masterclass in following the money to its source. Someone inside Dante's organization had been feeding information to Orlov, and now she knew exactly who wore those distinctive red cufflinks. Bianca appeared with fresh coffee and a knowing look, her efficiency a comforting constant in the chaos. The boss wants updates as soon as they return, she said quietly, setting down the steaming mug. He hasn't left his office since you spoke. Sarah nodded, gathering her documentation into a neat stack. She'd present the full picture, Marco's theft, Orlov's manipulation, the compromised shipments, and the money trail leading straight to those distinctive cufflinks. Numbers didn't lie, and these told a story of calculated betrayal that would demand blood as payment. The palazzo settled into wait mode, tense and alert. Guards rotated positions silently, communicating with hand signals and brief nods. Surveillance feeds showed quiet streets, deceptively peaceful. In the distance, city lights sparkled innocently, masking the power plays and betrayals happening in shadows between buildings and behind closed doors. Sarah returned to the balcony, Fico at her heels, his ears perked at every distant sound. The wind carried hints of rain and autumn leaves, the scent of change. Below, headlights swept the courtyard as another security team completed their circuit, their presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the danger. Her phone sat heavy in her pocket, waiting for Luca's next update. She'd built her life on fixing others' messes, cleaning up after Marco's mistakes and finding solutions where others saw only problems. But this time the solution wouldn't come through compromise or negotiation. The numbers had revealed an ugly truth, and now that truth would become a weapon in Dante's hands, a weapon she had crafted with her expertise. The clock ticked toward 10:30 p.m., each minute stretching like an hour. Somewhere in the city, Luca and Rafe moved through the night with their precious cargo, navigating streets that might hide enemies at every corner. Soon, the drive's contents would confirm what the financial trails had already exposed. Sarah watched the darkness, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill, knowing that her world of spreadsheets and ledgers had armed her with something more potent than any bullet: certainty. Sunlight streamed through the palazzo windows as Dante entered Sarah's suite at 9 a.m., carrying 2 espressos and the recovered flash drive. His movements were precise, controlled, but tension radiated from his shoulders. "The drive's contents," he said, placing it beside her laptop. "You should see this." Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed the files. Her breath caught. Spreadsheets detailed Orlov's offshore accounts, complete with dates, amounts, and, most damning, payoffs to U.S. officials. The scope was staggering. "This is why Marco was marked," she murmured. "This drive makes me valuable enough to start a war." "Yes," Dante's voice was tight. "Which is why I have a solution." He paused, dark eyes meeting hers. "Marry me. Today." Sarah's hand stilled on the mouse. "What?" "If you're my wife, you're bound to my family by law and custom. No rival can touch you without triggering a blood oath." His words were measured, practical. "The Bratva can't claim you as debt if you're already legally mine." She studied him, noting the careful distance he maintained, the way his fingers tapped once against his coffee cup, a pianist's tell of concealed emotion. "3 conditions," Sarah said finally. "Non-negotiable." Dante nodded for her to continue. "First, Marco lives under your protection. Permanently." She held up a second finger. "I keep my career with oversight of your legitimate companies." The third finger rose. "And if you ever lie to me, I end this marriage on my say-so." Yes to all. No hesitation, no bargaining. His immediate acceptance carried more weight than any flowery proposal. They left for the courthouse at 1 p.m., Bianca accompanying them as witness. Sarah wore a simple white dress Bianca had found. No veil, no bouquet. The courthouse steps were sun-warmed, peaceful. Inside, the judge began the civil ceremony at 1:22 p.m. Sarah registered random details: the judge's wire-rimmed glasses, Bianca's steady presence, Dante's warmth beside her. The first gunshot shattered the upper window like thunder. Dante moved with liquid speed, tackling Sarah behind a marble pillar as glass rained down. His body curved over hers, shielding her from debris. From the stairwell, Rafe's return fire cracked sharp and precise. Luca herded the judge to cover, while Bianca gripped Sarah's arm, dragging her toward a side exit. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "Vehicles ready," Bianca snapped into her comm. "Southeast door now," they sprinted through service. Corridors, Dante's team moving with practiced efficiency. By 1:30 p.m., they were sealed in an armored car, the judge pale but composed beside them. "We need this finalized," Dante said. "Now, before rumors spread that could get her killed." The judge nodded, pulling out emergency paperwork designed for threatened officials. Sarah signed her name, hands steady, despite adrenaline. Dante's signature followed, bold and certain. The drive back to the palazzo was tense, everyone scanning for threats. Sarah felt the new ring's weight on her finger, platinum, elegant, chosen by Bianca that morning, a symbol of protection wrapped in precious metal. They arrived at 2:45 p.m., married on paper and bonded by shared danger. Guards tripled the perimeter, while Luca and Rafe coordinated with police contacts to control the narrative. Through the afternoon, Sarah worked remotely, analyzing the drive's data for leverage points. Dante moved between security briefings and phone calls, his presence a constant awareness, even when he was rooms away. At 6:30 p.m., she found him in the music room, stillness settling over them both. The piano's polished surface reflected the evening light as Dante sat, fingers hovering over keys that had been silent since his mother's death. The melody began softly, the same one she'd heard through the wall that first night. But this time, instead of stopping, he played on. The notes wove together, building to something both melancholy and hopeful. Sarah stood by the window, tracing her ring's smooth surface. The final chords resonated through the room, like a vow neither of them knew how to voice yet. A promise of protection, of choice, of possibilities neither had imagined before bullets and spreadsheets threw them together. Outside, guards patrolled. Somewhere in the city, their enemies plotted. But in this moment, there was only the music, the fading light, and two people learning to trust in ways that transcended contracts and conditions. Fico padded in, settling at Dante's feet as the last notes faded. The dog's presence softened the formal space, a reminder that even fortresses could contain unexpected warmth. Bianca appeared silently with fresh coffee, her efficiency unchanged by the day's chaos. She'd already updated the house records to reflect Sarah's new status, ensuring every staff member understood that their mistress held real power, not just borrowed authority. The ring caught the evening light as Sarah lifted her cup. Across the room, Dante's shoulders had lost their earlier tension. The music had steadied him, as it always did after violence. Their eyes met briefly. No words needed, just quiet acknowledgement of the day's weight and the strange peace they'd found in its aftermath. Dr. Leon's gentle hands cleaned the shallow cut on Sarah's forearm, the antiseptic's sharp smell filling the room at 7 p.m. Glass fragments from the courthouse windows lay like diamonds on the gauze pad. Dante gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. The silence stretched until Dr. Leon finished bandaging and quietly excused herself. "I need to tell you something," Dante said, his voice rough. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening grounds. "There was someone before. Her name was Alessia." Sarah stayed still, letting him find the words. "She worked at an art gallery, loved Caravaggio, hated my coffee." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before vanishing. "The car bomb was meant for me. Someone inside my organization, someone I trusted, gave the orders." His fingers traced the window's edge. "That's why I'm..." He paused. "Meticulous with promises, merciless with betrayal, because I learned the cost of blind trust." Sarah absorbed this, understanding blooming like bruises, his ironclad words about consent, the way he watched his own people, the piano music that only played when darkness pressed close. "I've always been everyone's safety net," she said softly. "Marco, my parents, the deli's books. Fixing things became who I was, not what I chose." She met his gaze in the window's reflection. "I'm done being that unless I choose it." He turned, something raw in his expression. "How do we do this?" "We make our own language," Sarah said. "Clear signals, no assumptions." They negotiated quietly. A hand on the shoulder meant stay. 2 taps meant stop. Using their names meant absolute truth was needed. "Dante," she tested, watching him still at the weight she gave his name. He moved closer, telegraphing each step. "Sarah." Her name carried the same gravity. When he finally kissed her, it was slow and heated. Giving her time to pull away, she chose to lean in instead, tasting coffee and promise on his lips. They stopped before crossing lines they couldn't uncross, both breathing hard. "Patience," he murmured against her hair. "Patience," she agreed, though her pulse raced. At 10:20 p.m., Sarah sat with Luca in the security office, reviewing the flash drive's contents. Spreadsheets filled the screens, numbers marching in precise columns. "There," she pointed. 2 payments to Meridiana Logistics, both signed by VC. Luca frowned. "Vincenzo Costa? Or a phantom signature to mislead us." She rubbed her tired eyes. "We need more proof." They brought their findings to Dante, who immediately scheduled a dawn audit of Meridiana's books. "We'll force the mole into the open." By midnight, exhaustion and hunger drove them to the kitchen. Bianca appeared with fresh pasta, the normalcy of food grounding them. Sarah twirled spaghetti on her fork, watching Dante and Luca discuss security rotations. When Bianca dropped a pan, the resulting clatter made them all jump, then surprisingly laugh. The sound felt foreign but necessary, bleeding away some of the day's tension. At 12:10 a.m., Sarah sent Marco a careful text. "Stay upstairs, lock the door, no guests." She deleted and rewrote it twice before sending, each word weighted with unspoken worry. In Dante's suite, they moved, around each other carefully, hyper-aware of the new ring and vows binding them. The bed loomed large, a territory yet unmarked by trust or desire. "Take the bed," Dante said. "I'll use the couch." Sarah chose the left side, leaving space that felt both like a boundary and an invitation. She listened to him settle on the couch, both of them awake and aware of the nearness, the possibility, and the patience they'd chosen. Fico padded between them, curling up halfway between bed and couch as if understanding his role as furry chaperone. The dog's presence lightened the weight of everything unsaid. Bianca had left fresh towels and a silk robe hanging in the bathroom, practical comfort wrapped in luxury. The gesture reminded Sarah that while she might be a tactical asset, the staff saw her as more, a person worthy of small kindnesses. Through the window, guards moved in precise patterns, their flashlights cutting through darkness. The security feed on a distant monitor showed Marco's apartment door, still closed and locked. In the garage, Luca's team prepped the vehicles for tomorrow's audit, weapons cleaned and loaded. Sarah traced the bandage on her arm, remembering the courthouse glass raining down. Dante had moved without hesitation to shield her, not because she was property to protect, but because protection was as natural to him as breathing. From the couch came the soft sound of steady breathing. Sarah wondered if he was truly asleep or just giving her space to process. The piano stood silent in the corner, its keys holding memories of both loss and new beginnings. Their wedding rings caught the dim light, matching platinum bands chosen for durability rather than flash. Like everything else about their arrangement, the rings were practical first, with deeper meaning hiding beneath the surface. Outside, the city hummed with night traffic and distant sirens. Inside this fortress of limestone and loyalty, two people who had never planned to trust again were learning new languages of safety. Tomorrow would bring audits and danger and more negotiations of space and touch. But tonight, they rested in the quiet certainty that some choices, even made under pressure, could still be right. Sunlight spilled through the palazzo windows at 7:45 a.m. as Sarah reviewed final preparations for the Meridiana audit. The thick manila envelope arrived without fanfare, just another morning delivery among many. Inside, pristine bank statements spilled across her desk like accusations. Each page told a story she didn't want to believe, detailed transactions showing Dante systematically engineering Marco's debt. Cash funneled through shell companies into rigged poker games. Dates, times, amounts, all perfectly documented. Her hands trembled as she spread out the evidence. A photo slipped free, Dante at a poker table, his expression cold and calculating. The timestamp matched one of Marco's worst losses. The forgery was masterful, almost too perfect. But the dates, aligned with Marco's spiral into debt. The paper trail was immaculate. Everything made horrible sense. She'd been a mark all along, maneuvered into position by the very man who'd promised to protect her. Dante found her still staring at the documents, her wedding ring feeling like lead on her finger. "Sarah." His voice was rough. "I can explain." She looked up, remembering his story about Alessia, another woman who'd trusted and died for it. The parallel struck her like a physical blow. His hesitation spoke volumes. "Don't!" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "I won't be another casualty of your games." Vincenzo Costa materialized in the doorway, impeccable as always in his tailored suit. His cufflinks caught the light, red enamel gleaming like fresh blood. "Perhaps," he suggested smoothly. "It would be best if Ms. Valenti and her brother relocated temporarily. A neutral location while we investigate these concerning allegations." Sarah's analytical mind kicked in despite her pain. "I want Luca to accompany us." Costa shook his head regretfully. "Impossible. He's essential for the audit. But I've arranged excellent security, a different team, untainted by any potential corruption." She wrote the note with steady hands, each word carefully chosen. "I won't be property. If this is you, we're done. If it isn't, prove it." While Costa stepped out to make calls, she slipped the flash drives back up into her bra. The original was safely hidden in her suite, but redundancy had saved her before. Marco arrived, looking bewildered, escorted by two unfamiliar guards. At 9:30 a.m., Costa ushered them into a black sedan with tinted windows. "Luca will meet us at the safe location," Costa assured them, his smile never reaching his eyes. Sarah counted turns as they drove, mental map expanding with each unexpected deviation from familiar routes. They passed warehouses she didn't recognize, the neighborhood growing increasingly industrial. Something cold settled in her stomach as she realized they were heading toward the river, not away from it. At 10:15 a.m., the sedan rolled to a stop inside a vast warehouse. Faded Cyrillic graffiti marked the walls. This was Bratva territory. Mikhail Orlov emerged from the shadows like a shark scenting blood, his smile all teeth. Costa held up his phone triumphantly. On the screen, Dante's face was frozen mid-scan, captured by security cameras as he reviewed documents in his office. "Your husband's empire is already crumbling," Orlov said, his accent thick with satisfaction. "Costa's coup is proceeding exactly as planned. Funded by my money, of course." Two men grabbed Sarah's arms, dragging her toward a metal chair bolted to the floor. The chains around her ankles clinked with cold finality. She forced herself to stay calm, cataloging details through the haze of betrayal. 3 exits, the main door they'd entered, a fire escape to the left, a loading dock to the right, security cameras in each corner, they're red. Lights steady, 2 guards on Marco, 4 on her. Orlov's lieutenant by the door, hand on his weapon. The rage came in waves, at Costa's treachery, at her own blindness. She should have recognized the significance of those red cufflinks sooner. Should have connected the dots between Meridiana Logistics and the consigliere who always wore Italian silk and blood-red enamel. Marco struggled against his captors, earning a sharp blow to the ribs. "Leave her alone!" "Quiet," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite everything. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Costa straightened his perfect tie. "Nothing personal, Kara. Just business. Your husband's old-world notions of honor were becoming inconvenient." The warehouse echoed with the sound of boats on the river, distant horns marking the passage of cargo ships. Sunlight filtered through grimy windows, catching dust motes and the gleam of weapon metal. The air smelled of motor oil and river water. Sarah tested the chains subtly, feeling for weak links while appearing to slump in defeat. The flash drive pressed against her skin, a reminder that she still held one card they didn't know about. Her mind raced through scenarios, calculating angles and odds with the same precision she used for audits. Orlov's men set up laptops, presumably to monitor the coup's progress. Costa paced, checking his phone repeatedly. The tableau felt frozen in time, the calm before a storm about to break. At 10:20 a.m., fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the warehouse as Orlov circled Sarah's chair like a predator toying with prey. He held up the doctored bank statements, letting them flutter to the ground one by one. "Such meticulous planning by your husband," he taunted, his accent thick with mockery. "Creating the debt, positioning the pieces, all to acquire you. Men like him become obsessed. They must possess what they cannot have." Sarah kept her face neutral, though her mind raced. "My brother needs water." Orlov snapped his fingers. A guard brought over a plastic bottle, and Sarah deliberately fumbled it, spilling drops near a junction box of exposed cables. A tiny spark confirmed her suspicion. Faulty wiring, useful information. Her eyes tracked to the circuit breaker panel mounted on the far wall. Old, industrial grade, probably tied to the sprinkler system. She filed that detail away while pretending to shrink from Orlov's proximity. "When Dante realizes his precious wife is missing," Orlov continued, "we'll start negotiations. Perhaps a finger first, then a hand. Each piece traded for territory until he remembers his place." Costa stood by the laptops, methodically removing his expensive jacket. The red enamel cufflinks caught the light as he rolled up his sleeves. "Don't damage her too severely. She still has value as an accountant." Meanwhile, across the city, at 10:30 a.m., Luca burst into Dante's study at the Palazzo. "They never made it to the safe house. Place is empty." Rafe followed, tablet in hand. "Found a dead camera on the approach road. Costa's signature move. He did the same thing in Miami last year." The room temperature seemed to drop as Dante went absolutely still. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet of a blade being unsheathed. "Get every captain in the war room. Now!" Within minutes, the Palazzo's command center hummed with controlled chaos. Dante accessed the flash drive credentials Sarah had duplicated the previous night, his fingers flying across keyboards as he systematically froze Orlov's offshore accounts. "Call in every marker," he ordered. "I want his cash flow shut down across the city. No transactions, no transfers, no paper cups of coffee without my knowledge." Luca worked his phone, activating sleeper assets in every borough. "Already done. Dock workers are walking off, claiming safety violations. Bank managers are finding system errors. Even his favorite restaurant just lost power." Back in the warehouse at 12:10 p.m., Sarah manufactured a convincing panic attack. Shallow breathing, trembling hands, the works. "Please," she gasped, "I need the bathroom." The guard roughly yanked her up, half dragging her toward a grimy door. While he fumbled with her chains, she palmed a metal splinter she'd worked loose from her chair. One quick movement and it was wedged in the door hinge, subtle enough to go unnoticed, but sufficient to weaken the mechanism. On her way back to the chair, she pulled an accounting marker from her pocket. Under the pretense of stumbling, she drew a precise double line beneath a peeling Bay 3 stencil on a support beam. Dante would recognize her signature markup. She used the same notation style on every audit. Costa paced the warehouse floor, barking instructions into his phone. His perfect composure showed cracks. a loosened tie, sweat at his temples. Something in Dante's response had rattled him. Orlov's men grew increasingly agitated as their digital accounts went dark. One by one, screens showed frozen assets and denied access. The Russian's face purpled with rage. "Find out how he's doing this," he shouted. "Check every system." At 2 p.m., Dante's surveillance drones identified unusual truck movements near the docks. Thermal imaging showed clusters of armed men in warehouses marked Bay 1 through 5. "Grid search pattern," he ordered, his voice arctic. "Start with Bay 3. It's the most defensible position with river access." He knew Sarah would have left him a sign if she could. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. Sarah watched the changing light through the warehouse windows, tracking the sun's movement. She noticed the guards growing jumpier as their phones stopped working and radio chatter increased. As twilight approached at 5:45 p.m., she caught Marco's eye and mouthed instructions. "When sprinklers start, lie flat, crawl to loading dock." He gave an almost imperceptible nod. The beating had left him bruised but alert, and she saw the same determination in his face that had gotten them through childhood crises. Outside the warehouse at 6:05 p.m., a convoy of black vehicles rolled silently toward the docks, engines cut to minimize detection. In the lead SUV, Dante checked his weapon with mechanical precision. "No mercy for the ones between me and my wife," he told Luca, voice devoid of emotion. Luca chambered a round in response. "None." Inside the warehouse, Sarah flexed her wrists against the chains, testing the give. She'd spent hours working one link loose while pretending to cower. Her marker was still in her pocket and the flash drive pressed against her ribs. Insurance and weapon in one. Costa's phone rang again. His face went slack as he listened, then white with fury. "What do you mean, all accounts are locked? Check the offshore holdings." Orlov grabbed the phone. "Impossible! I routed everything through shell companies." Sarah allowed herself a tiny smile. She'd taught Dante how to follow money trails during their late-night audit sessions. He was using her own techniques against their enemies. The warehouse grew darker as the sun set, shadows lengthening across the concrete floor. Guards shifted uneasily, weapons ready but unsure where to point them. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. At 6:10 p.m., Sarah's muscles tensed as she gripped the chain binding her wrists. With one powerful yank, she toppled the metal table beside her, sending it crashing into the sprinkler head above. The impact shattered the glass bulb, releasing a torrent of water that immediately drenched everything below. Electrical systems shorted out in rapid succession. Sparks flew from junction boxes as half the warehouse plunged into strobing darkness. The remaining lights flickered erratically, creating a disorienting dance of shadows and sudden brightness. Water drummed against concrete and metal, drowning out the cursing of guards, scrambling to maintain control. Marco, following Sarah's instructions, dropped flat and began inching toward the loading dock. At precisely 6:12 p.m., multiple explosions rocked the building as Dante's team breached 3 entry points simultaneously. Through the chaos of water and strobing lights, Sarah glimpsed dark figures moving with military precision. Orlov's panicked shots echoed off metal walls, the muzzle flashes adding to the chaotic light show. His men returned fire blindly, their bullets punching holes in crates and ricocheting off support beams. Dante materialized from the shadows like an avenging spirit, his movements fluid and lethal. Each time the emergency lights flashed, he appeared in a different position, leaving unconscious or dead guards in his wake. His face showed no emotion as he systematically eliminated threats, protecting the path to Sarah. Costa bolted for the side exit, his perfect suit now soaked and clinging. Sarah, despite her bound wrists, managed to lunge toward the wall cabinet she'd noticed during her earlier surveillance. The emergency flare gun inside was exactly where she'd calculated it would be. With water dripping into her eyes, she aimed and fired. The phosphorus burst exploded near Costa's feet, forcing him back from escape and illuminating him in harsh red light. Luca appeared from nowhere, tackling him with bone-crushing force. Orlov grabbed Sarah's chain, yanking her against him as a human shield. His breath came in terrified pants against her neck. She felt the press of his gun barrel against her ribs, right where the flash drive remained hidden. Drawing on years of being the family protector, Sarah didn't freeze. She twisted sharply, driving her shoulder up and back into Orlov's solar plexus. The Russian's grip loosened just enough. Dante didn't hesitate. 2 precise shots rang out, and Orlov crumpled, his grip on Sarah falling away like water. By 6:30 p.m., the immediate violence had ended. Water continued cascading from the sprinklers, creating curtains of mist in the emergency lighting. Costa, pinned under Luca's knee, began screaming accusations. "Dante staged it all!" he shrieked, spittle flying. "The debt, the poker games, he orchestrated everything to get her." Sarah's voice cut through his hysteria. "I need a laptop, now." Someone produced one, and despite her dripping clothes and trembling hands, Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision. She pulled up the forged documents, projecting them onto a nearby wall. "Look here," she said, voice steady as she highlighted details. The metadata shows time zone inconsistencies. These transactions supposedly happened in Philadelphia, but the server timestamps are from Moscow. She zoomed in on the financial records. The checksum digits don't match the clearinghouse protocols. Amateur mistake. They copied the format but didn't understand the underlying verification system. Finally, she enlarged the doctored photo of Dante at the poker game. And here, the reflection in his cufflink is backward. Basic photo manipulation error. The warehouse fell silent except for the patter of water. Sarah's voice carried clear authority as she laid out the truth. Costa used Meridiana Logistics as a shell to funnel money to Orlov. He fabricated evidence to drive a wedge between us, probably hoping I'd run straight into Orlov's trap. Dante turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Your choice," he said simply. "What happens to him?" She looked at Costa, shivering and pathetic on the wet floor. The power to end him tempted her. He'd endangered her family, betrayed his oath, caused deaths. But she remembered her own words about choosing who she wanted to be. "I won't be executioner," she said firmly. "Handle it through proper channels. Justice, not vengeance." Dante nodded once, respect evident in his eyes. "Take him for trial," he ordered his men. "Full process under the code." He held his gun out to Sarah, grip first. "If you want it, it's yours." She studied the weapon, then gently pushed it back toward him. "I trust you to finish this clean." The scene transformed as Bianca arrived at 7:20 p.m., bringing order with her. She distributed blankets and dry clothes with quiet efficiency. Outside, sirens faded as Dante's people secured the perimeter and processed the scene. Sarah stood wrapped in Dante's jacket, both of them drenched from the sprinklers. Water dripped from his eyelashes and her hair, but neither moved to step apart. She pressed her face into his throat, feeling his pulse strong and steady against her lips. "Take me home," she whispered. The palazzo's lights gleamed through the rain-washed evening as Sarah stepped inside at 8:45 p.m., her clothes still damp from the warehouse. Water droplets clung to her hair, catching the warm glow of the chandelier overhead as she crossed the marble threshold. Dr. Leone waited in the atrium with her medical bag, her efficient hands already pulling out antiseptic and bandages, face set in professional concern. "Just bruises," Sarah insisted, wincing slightly as she shrugged off her jacket but submitted to the examination while watching Marco across the room. Her brother sat hunched on an antique settee, hands trembling around a cup of tea Bianca had pressed into them. Steam curled upward, fogging his downcast face. He was pale but unharmed. The sight loosened something tight in Sarah's chest, a knot of worry she'd been carrying since they'd separated at the warehouse. "He stays under protection," Dante said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute law as he entered the room, still wearing his coat, dusted with evidence of the night's violence. His eyes swept over Sarah's form, cataloging every visible mark. "Until every trace of Orlov's operation is dismantled." Marco flinched at Dante's tone but didn't argue, just clutched his teacup tighter, knuckles whitening with pressure. The next 48 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance, each movement precise and calculated. Dante moved through his territory with lethal efficiency, dismantling Orlov's network without needless bloodshed. He returned late each night, tension easing from his shoulders only when his eyes found Sarah working in the study. Meridiana Logistics dissolved under Sarah's forensic scrutiny, its legitimate assets redistributed to clean subsidiaries, its tainted connections severed with surgical precision. Luca stepped into his new role as underboss with quiet competence, coordinating security sweeps and managing territory transitions. His normally stoic expression warmed slightly when he brought Sarah updates, a mutual respect growing between them. When Dante called a meeting of his captains, two who had taken Orlov's bribes found themselves stripped of rank and escorted to the city limits, alive but exiled, a message of mercy wrapped in steel that reverberated through every corner of their world. "A new era requires new loyalty," Dante had said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "Choose wisely which side of this line you stand on." Sarah claimed her place as CFO with the same methodical attention to detail that had exposed Costa's betrayal. She implemented new compliance protocols, cross-checking every account and subsidiary. When she discovered the external auditor had helped Costa hide transactions, she fired him personally, her voice never rising above a conversational tone as she detailed his crimes. "I respect expertise," she'd told him, sliding the incriminating documents across the polished desk. "But never when it's used to betray trust. You have 30 minutes to clear your office." Costa's tribunal proceeded with cold efficiency. Sarah had organized the evidence into airtight chains of custody, bank records, surveillance footage, witness statements, all meticulously labeled and cross-referenced. Even Dante's rivals on the council couldn't dispute the paper trail of treachery she revealed. The verdict came swiftly, carried out under their code with the same precision that marked everything in their world. Dante returned afterward, his hands clean, but his eyes carrying shadows, until Sarah's touch anchored him back to the present. On the third morning, sunlight spilled across South Philly, glinting off puddles from the previous night's rain as Sarah returned to Valenti's deli. Bianca accompanied her, elegantly dressed yet practical as always, along with a discreet security detail that melted into the background, positioned at strategic corners of the street. Marco worked beside her in silence as they scrubbed spray-painted threats from the brick walls, the harsh chemical smell of cleaners mixing with the familiar sense of the neighborhood. The familiar motions felt like reclaiming something vital, washing away the stains of fear that had marked her family's legacy. "New locks," Sarah said, watching the locksmith work, the metallic sounds of his tools a comforting rhythm. "New start." Her fingers traced the fresh paint on the doorframe, the smooth finish representing everything they'd fought to preserve. She retrieved the predatory loan documents from the safe, her signature forged in Costa's careful hand, the paper feeling tainted against her skin. The criminal complaint she filed would ensure the lender faced consequences through legal channels, proof that justice didn't always require violence. Marco watched her sign the papers, his eyes reflecting a mixture of shame and relief. "You fixed it," he whispered. "You always fix everything." "Not this time," Sarah corrected gently. "This time we're fixing it together." The rooftop of the palazzo transformed at sunset, white lights strung like stars across the urban sky, tiny pinpricks of brightness against the deepening blue. Dante had arranged a small table, elegant in its simplicity, fine china, crystal glasses that caught the light, a bottle of wine chilling in an ice bucket. The piano stood nearby, brought up specifically for this moment, its polished surface reflecting the twinkling lights. He played the melody that had haunted the halls during her first nights here, but now it felt complete, resolved, the notes flowing with certainty rather than longing. His fingers moved with practiced grace, emotion pouring through every chord. When the final note faded, lingering in the night air, he turned to her with unguarded eyes, vulnerability showing beneath his usual mask of control. "I can't promise you a clean life," he said, voice rough with honesty. "The world I inhabit will always have shadows, but I swear you'll have truth from me, always. Protection without cage bars, and your place at my right hand, earned and chosen." His hand reached for hers, the gesture more intimate than any embrace. Sarah stepped closer, her fingers finding his, the warmth of his skin against hers, sending electricity up her arm. "I choose this," she said. "Choose you," with open eyes and a stubborn heart. She laid out her terms again, each word deliberate, weighted with importance. "No more lies between us, no more treating people as collateral, and we find a way together to step back from the bloodiest parts of the empire." "Yes," he breathed, the single syllable carrying the weight of transformation, and sealed the promise with a kiss that claimed and cherished in equal measure, his hands cradling her face as though she were something precious and rare. A week later, they stood barefoot in warm sand as sunset painted the private cove in gold, the water lapping gently at the shore in rhythmic whispers. The safe house perched above them on the cliffs, its windows catching the last rays of daylight. But this moment belonged to the shore, to the intimate circle gathered to witness their union. Luca stood as witness, his usual stoic expression softened, hands clasped formally before him, though his eyes betrayed his happiness. Bianca arranged white flowers with precise care, each bloom positioned just so, while Dr. Leone dabbed discreetly at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Fico trotted importantly between them, his bow tie slightly askew, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting shells. They exchanged simple bands, the inscription inside reading, "Sempre con Celta," always with choice. The words captured everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built from danger and trust and stubborn hope. The metal felt warm against Sarah's skin, a tangible reminder of promises made without coercion. The waves provided rhythm as they danced in the sand, her bare feet between his, her head tucked against his shoulder, where she could feel his heartbeat steady and sure. Their power kept the darkness at bay, not through force or fear, but through the strength of two people who chose each other every day, who built something fierce and tender from the ashes of betrayal. Sempre, he whispered against her hair, his breath warm against her skin. Kun skelta, she finished, and felt his smile against her skin, the curve of his lips a promise of happiness to come.